Record. Everybody, welcome to the Name It podcast. My name is Nazarene Trays. I'm your host, and today I am talking with Corinne Mills. Did I get your name right, Corinne?
Yeah, Corinne. That's
Corinne.
right.
Great. Awesome. Corinne Mills is a power coach, trust facilitator, and workplace MC. She is the founder of Corinne Mills LLC, a professional development consultancy for transformational leaders. Her work frames and names the cultural norms that we take for granted, so she's a perfect guest for this. So we can take real action and make real commitments to shift what causes harm. It's so beautiful. My point of view centers Black progress. Her point of view centers Black progress as liberty and justice for all through an American media lens. She works to make essential discussions accessible. She teaches through modeling and honoring the oral traditions that raised her. And she spent the bulk of her career working across every media industry, academia, and human resources, the through line of which has been navigating corporate systems while Black. Not long after losing her mother in 2015, she reached a stalemate with the tacit rules of corporate life, the ones designed to exclude her from decision-making. She began to coach and facilitate for other fed-up professionals seeking to lead on their own authority, and officially launched her consultancy in the fall of 2018. She works best with passionate progressives in their professional primes looking to innovate, iterate, and sustain the way forward. To learn more about her, go to CorinneMills.com. That's KorinMills.com. So, Corinne, welcome. And I am just, you're going to be speaking at our conference and in the Party Into the Patriarchy, and I'm so excited to have you there. So excited.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, and I can't thank PK Much of Lizbeth Magazine enough for introducing us. And you work with Power Bitches as well, is that right?
Yes, I work with the founder of Power Bitches, Rachel Hills, to manage to really administer this community of women remaking the world. That's how we define ourselves, as Power Bitches. And through that, that's how I met PK. PK is a member of the community who runs her own feminist community to support small business owners. Is the best way I can describe it. I'm sure it's much more complex than that. I'll let PK describe herself, but she's a badass and really impressive model of being out here on your own as an entrepreneur and a feminist making change.
Yeah, we're actually going to have CV Hartwell talk about how to make a feminist business and get paid at the conference as well. So I'm excited about that.
Yes, CV is also a member of our community and of PK's community.
I'm so excited. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So you're going to be talking about breaking down business as usual at the conference. And I'm so excited because you and I have been hearing people saying, get back to business as usual from coronavirus for months now, I'm sure. And it's like, that's not what we're going to do. So
it's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. There were before times, and now we're in the now times. We're not going back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're so right.
We're simply not, people can accept it and come to terms with it in their own ways. They can continue to call it business as usual, but that's not what it is. And getting with that program brings with it its own relief and a way forward where sometimes it looks like there's none.
Well, the change, I mean, the phrase itself indicates an obscuration of power. It's the power to say, we are going to do this, right? And other people saying, but why?
Yeah, there's all these cliches to our norms, like, and not to hate on cliches I like to reframe, which is a great thing that I'm constantly doing, is look at the frame, what's another way to look at this? And I often like to reframe cliches as ancient wisdom. That's where they come from, is that they've their tried and true ways of thinking of things. But business as usual is one of them. And sorry, you just named another one of like, oh, obfuscating power. Oh, power. Power is another one. Like, we talk about some of these things and think of them as just like we're all operating from the same framework of understanding, and we're not, and making lots and lots of assumptions about what power means, what the cliche of power means, what the cliche of business as usual means, status quo, all of that stuff. And taking these concepts for granted is the way in which like they work against us.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
Just being,
oh, I'm sorry.
Like the basically, like, as simply put as I can at this point, since you haven't really even asked me a question, is just start from zero with these concepts that you repeat and you hear repeated to you, and like, what do they actually mean to you? Say that instead and see where it gets you.
Mm-hmm. We're actually going into the key lenses you encourage us to look at is power and through power, right? So why is looking at power so important?
Well, because it's a really vague concept, but it operates like, the way that we use it conceptually is vague and also oppressive, right? Mm-hmm. But it affects all of us. We're all navigating it. We all have it. So it doesn't have to work in any one particular way. You can hold power in your own hands. You can interact with it in a different way, and you can disempower what's working against you. You don't have to take power for granted, as though, like, a lot of times when we're talking about power, institutional power, et cetera, we're making an assumption that there is a powerful father figure to which we must submit. And nobody's saying it in that language, but that if you break down the frame in a given context, that's the nature of the context people are in. Is like, the power is their boss, their job, their the money they have in the bank, which is really like the banker, the president, the Congress, some external power that is in charge of what you do. And the passive acceptance of that, the fact that we don't actively say that out loud or like restate it or say it clearly, make it plain in plain English, is part of the way that we all like collude to keep it stuck in place. So that's a real like big, grand, general way of saying there's always a very specific way to look at power. Let's look at what it means for you to have power in your life and your work right now. And let's talk about it in real active terms. And when we do, it's likely to surprise you how much power you actually have and passively hand over that you don't have to.
That is so true. Everything you're saying is just like ringing a bell, like, yes. I often remind my clients and people in my personal life to focus on their locus of control. Mm-hmm. Like, what can you actually control? Mm-hmm. You control what you eat, you control where you sleep, you can control, some degree of who you talk to every day. So, people get so disempowered by looking at the national news, and it feels like they are then discounting, as you say, the power they hold in their own hands at this very moment.
Yeah, and it's not to blame folks for doing that either. That's another thing, construct that we take for granted, is blame and shame, and that everything is like a one-to-one binary situation where you're either right or wrong, you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong. And that's something to reframe as well, is that consider just accepting these things as reality without them being right or wrong. They just are. So now what do we do? Now what can you do? If you're a grown-up adult who doesn't have to submit to a punishing parent, what would you do? What will you do? What can you do? And that's the empowerment. It's not to say you've been doing it wrong, here's how to do it right. It's to say, let's look at it like this. And now what do we have? You tell me.
Mm-hmm.
And just practice that muscle of leadership, your own leadership, because that undermines a structural leadership that to which we passively submit that oppresses us, simply put.
So, you're talking about this already, but I want to just kind of ask it a different way. So my friend Erin, who's a sociologist, says power obscures itself. What do we get when we look at power, aside from personal empowerment?
We get a way forward. We get to remember and remind ourselves of possibilities that are obscured the way that power obscures. Like, that's a really big, heady concept, that concept that power obscures itself. I think that's kind of what you said. And it has a lot of meanings and a lot of implications, but what happens when you shake the frame, like when you shake it up, when you look at it a different way, is you see something different, and you're not alone in it. This is work that like you can do on your own, but this is not about like personal responsibility will save us. That's another thing that I don't intend to say. What I mean to say is, when you look from a different view, you see someone you didn't see. You see them in a different way. You engage your empathy which allows you to understand something more deeply, and that allows you to sparks new possibility and new potential and new solutions. Because anyone who's looking around with open eyes can tell that what we already have, the status that we have, business as usual, continuing with the norms that we have is going to get us what we also have, which is an unsustainable earth for humans. We don't have a way forward unless we can shift the way we're looking at things. So that's what this like unearthing power, adding some light to it, breathing some fresh air and considering that we can't go back, and that maybe there's something valuable in what we don't know, what we don't understand, what we're not already doing. That's a way forward. That's the value of it. And hope. It's hope. Real hope, not just a pipe dream.
Oh my gosh. I just want to sit with what you said for a second. I love so much about what you said about the reframe, and I love what you said about hope. Earlier, we did this party at the end of the patriarchy in March. We had Executive Director Grazia Martinez Rojas talk about the discipline of hope that she learned from Black organizers. And she runs United We Dream, and they've had great victories in the last year to help people get citizenship who don't have it. And every time I feel like people are saying this or that terrible thing about the news, I always want to say yes, and yes, and we have more power than we realize, and neoliberalism tries to make us feel like we don't have any personal power. But it's not just about look out for yourself or take personal responsibility for global warming, because that's the bad attitude as well, right? It's more like, as I understand it, like what power do we have as a collective, and how can we turn away from, as you said, this image of a old white dude looking down on us and saying, do this, do that, just even in our heads. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, I'm a certified diversity coach. That's the training I come from. And my coach training taught me to work with metaphors and to point them out when people are using them. And lately I've really been getting into it. It's a skill like any other, you practice it or you don't. And right now I'm kind of like really into it. Like I'm getting it, I'm in flow with it. And I'm noticing that they're very powerful, and they also are often hidden, but they are powerful because they help us to understand concepts like really easily. And so it's really helpful sometimes to point out when somebody's talking in terms of a metaphor. And now I'm noticing how often I do it when I didn't used to notice it, and that this metaphor of the father figure, is the patriarch. This metaphor of the patriarch is real, is really real, and is really there for a lot of people. And I know this anecdotally, I know this experientially. I know that when I talk about the patriarch, it's uncomfortable. It feels like a cartoon that I'm talking about, this father figure that's in charge of you, that's giving you directions. But if you feel me and you're open to the conversation, so many people get with it. Like they can hear it because it is at play. It is in the back of our minds. It's a parental figure that to which we submit, and that we hold ourselves in our minds as adults like that. And I hear it regularly in the passive construction of language when people say, we should, you should. Who is the actor in a should? It's this father figure. And when we say we are, like the passive construction of verbs, like we are, sorry, I can't even think of one now, but like, when you're not when you're not the actor in the sentence, I'll give you an example the next time I hear it, but it's like, we should all over each other all the time. When we talk about what we're supposed to be doing, what you should be doing, the way things are, as though things are given to us, are a given, that we like don't scrutinize and don't question all the time around like what our norms and what our rules are. And if you just flip the way you're constructing that verb to like, who is the subject? Like, who's the person acting here? Who's the subject and who's the object? And put the sentence together more actively, that's an immediate practical way to give yourself more power, or to notice the way that the power is acting that you were just handing over.
You know, when you're talking about metaphors, you're reminding me of what Veronica Garcia said from the Wealth Reclamation Academy of Practitioners. She said, this is a metaphor I hope you will enjoy. We have eaten the story of capitalism. It's time for us to throw up that story and taste what different can look like. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Yes. I really like to co-sign. Like, I'm very much a proponent of the yes and construction, which comes from improv training.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like, yeah, consider saying yes when you hear something that makes sense, and like not just consider that as one practice. And so I'm saying yes to that really vivid imagery of like, just like throw it up. You don't have to choke that. You don't have to choke down capitalism. It's gross, but it's also like powerful, like to purge all of that. It's like, it's really gross and hard and upsetting and uncomfortable, but don't you always feel better once you get something toxic out of your system in that like immediate way? It's kind of like a violent thing that happens to your body. It's not ideal. It's not an ideal state of calm, but sometimes your body will lead you to what's in your best interest. And like, in that way, it's a gift. And it's like, wow, that's deep. Like, oh, I don't have to eat this rotten meal of capitalism. It's actually poisoning me. Like, see how far you can take the metaphor? You can just keep
it's poisoning all of us. Yes. And the metaphor makes it like a tangible thing. Yes.
Why does this food is poison? Why does it taste so good? Does it taste good? It's actually making me sick.
Maybe it doesn't taste good anymore. Maybe it never did. Maybe we thought we could only
Maybe I'm a vegan.
Maybe you're a vegan.
Maybe I can do it. Maybe I can go vegan. We'll see.
Yeah. Maybe I can too. Oh my God.
Don't get me started. Don't get me started on like how to care for ourselves as best we can, so we can keep going, and all the like anti-Blackness in in healthcare.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Say it again.
In every system that poisons us.
Yeah. So you actually talked about empathy, and we're going to talk about emotional intelligence in your session as well. You said, we might acknowledge how anger serves us so we can put it in its place and begin to notice how other folks' anger serves them, for example. So I know how my anger serves me, but how does your anger? You want me to tell you? I can tell you.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, so spite and anger are fantastic. And I really started my business because I noticed a lot of what you were talking about in terms of in your bio, right? Like these systems and structures not supporting me. And so I came out of working at the Urban League and decided that I wanted to draw attention to workplace justice issues like getting paid enough or stealing people's wages, which was happening, in like the last two places that I worked, and not just to me. And like asking people to work till 7 o'clock at night for literally salaried person for no reason, all sorts of things, making people cry. There's just so much I could go on and on about, right? But my anger really fueled me from all of the injustice to move towards creating a business and a life where I could ask people to question these structures with us together. And it sounds like that's what you're doing too.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels like part of my journey of healing, is just being like, well, let's just talk about the thing we can't talk about.
Yes. So are you bringing up how that like journey of discovery made you angry?
Yeah, it did. I was so mad. I was mad at the system. I was mad at my boss. I was mad at myself. I was mad at the world. I was just mad at like how every single part of it conspired to make a system where it wasn't just me, but so many folks were just dragged through the street, just chewed up and spit out by the system. You get too old to work for your nonprofit, you don't want to like pay for your healthcare, they just fire you, and there's no loyalty and you don't have any power, quote unquote, in that system. And so I thought, how can we say we're making a better world when we're treating our people so poorly? It's bullshit. And then I was like, why don't we look at this? Why don't we talk about staff love before donor love?
Yes. Okay. So thank you for all of that. So because that helps me to speak directly to what I mean when I talk about like, notice how your anger serves you. Like you're talking about how your anger, let me just first talk about like metaphors and on the topic of shifting our gaze and flipping the script and changing the frame. Consider that your anger is your sense of self, not you, everybody. Our anger is our sense of self. It doesn't just exist in one expression. Explosive, rageful anger is not the only kind of anger there is. Imagine that your anger exists on a spectrum from like just a tiny little ripple of a trigger, and like the way you feel like after a microaggression, for example, or like, like when you turn your expression like that felt left, that just went left, right? To all the way to rageful, maybe violent anger, right? And that's a spectrum, and there's infinity in between here and there, right? And all of it is your sense of self being called in. It's yourself, it's the involuntary part of you that registers that your own boundaries, your own terms, what matters to you, your sense of right and wrong is being called to attention. Either that boundary's been violated, or like something's pressing up against it. That's the spectrum. Like just imagine your anger in that way, and that it's one thing, one fixed thing, or that it's good or bad. That it just is, that it's a feeling that you can't avoid, that you can't wish away, that's calling your attention to your own sense of self and boundaries and what matters to you. Now imagine that your own sense of boundaries and sense of self and personal direction is right for you, is not wrong, and that you don't have to answer for it to anyone because it's yours. and you don't have to negotiate it, and you don't have to argue about it. Imagine that it's just information that you can notice, that your sense of self, like when you get angry, when something triggers you, you can begin to, with that awareness, notice, oh, this is my value that just came up. I'm not with this. It's actually your most clear self. And that's why for you, Mazreen, it came up that this is not right. What else is possible? Who else can I talk to about this? I'm clear that I won't do this, or I will do that in the face of this. I now can see this clearly, what this is, and like it snaps your priorities into position as well. And yours may not be the same as anyone else's. Your anger is not someone else's. So somebody else is not going to have the same trigger. They're not going to feel the same anger. But might they also be served by your clarity about what's sustainable and what's not? What just came up for you is very clear. It's like, I can't support this. I cannot allow you to step on my time in this way because my anger is invoked in a way that like you can understand better and better and better the more you're willing to notice it. You can understand those nuances and where you might be on the spectrum and what's the right expression of it, what's the right way to serve it. Because the way that you flow through a feeling and get to the next feeling is by serving it, is by acknowledging that my time is being disrespected and I need a tighter boundary around it. My values of self-care or care for others is being impacted, and I need to serve that. I need to communicate that somehow. I need to figure out how to put that on the table in this relationship. Or I need to make a decision about this workplace, because actually the more I notice it, even if it's painful or uncomfortable, I am clear that my boss or my teacher or my partner, my relationship cannot support this truth, but it's not going away. And that might be a difficult conversation you have to have, or a difficult process you have to work through, and not alone. But do you see how much information is possible once you start to work with like just recognizing the emotion as like instinctive data to work with?
Yes.
That's what I mean by emotion. That's what I mean by emotional intelligence. Every emotion is giving you a signal like that. And I learned a lot of this from a book called The Art of Empathy, and a teacher, I think she's a psychologist named Carla McLaren, who wrote the book. And it's like a textbook for all of your emotions. And something very wise that she says in there in the framing is that our emotions are not always right. It's not about your emotions being right or wrong. They're not always right. They are always true. And that's what the truth is. That's what in a deep way is what we mean by like the truth can be subjective. Like it's hard to pin down truths sometimes between two people. Your emotions are your truth. And the more you can work with honoring your truth, the more you can be, the more you can live in your own integrity, the more you can be a good citizen, the more you can be a good partner and show up, because you can show up for yourself and you can show up with others. And it's high skill behavior. Like that is high skill. Like that is the thing that mothers are doing all over the world that we like snap our fingers to and call ourselves queens over, is carrying emotional labor and managing, navigating how I feel versus how you feel, and working with the truth of that, whether it's like eloquent or articulate or not, working with the reality of the truth that you're confronted with, regardless of how you would rather position it and pretend it away to be. Like all of that emotional labor and skill that we see wielded in the world that's unpaid and obscured and not spoken into like clarity is very high skill, and we could all benefit from working with it more consciously, because that's what opens up possibility. That's what opens up like the space for like dealing with reality rather than this pretend that's destroying the earth.
Say it again.
It's not comfortable. And I'm like, you just got me going. But that's what I mean by like that I work with um, making difficult discussions accessible is like you have to start from somewhere before you get to all this place where I'm going. And you're not gonna go nowhere except where you're already stuck until you're willing to engage with like what's uncomfortable, but true. And so I'm here to help. I'm here to say that's real, that's okay, you're right, that's where we are. Let's go.
Mm-hmm. Well, clearly, you know, is this been devalued? It's been seen as women's work in that way, feminized and devalued. But it is so important and so necessary for people to come to you, I feel, and try to up their skill level and their empathy game and their emotional intelligence game, because how else are we going to get out of this mess? You know?
Yes.
It's like, if we can't acknowledge how we feel, then we can't change anything significantly. It's just going to snap back into shape.
Because you know the reality is how we feel. The reality is out of whack emotions all over the place, in your workplace, in your home, on the internet, like in your social media. It's people emoting out of control with no strong, like without a strong, healthy boundary in sight. Like we're not avoiding emotions anywhere. Even if we're afraid to talk in those terms, we're not actually avoiding emotional work. We're just fucking shit up all over the place by avoiding it. We could do it at a much higher skill level.
And really like, oh, go on, I'm sorry.
That way. That's it.
Well,
that's it.
Okay, well, what you're saying actually really is so beautiful, because it challenges these structures of patriarchy and white supremacy by saying that we have to look at our feelings. Because, you know, patriarchy says there are certain feelings that are okay to show for men and for women, and there are feelings that are not okay to show. Like, you know, women aren't supposed to be quote unquote angry, or women aren't supposed to be quote unquote sad, or, you know, maybe frustrated or whatever, right? And like men can have like this very narrow range of emotions. If you look at like the Marvel movies, for example, and how like, let's say, oh, I don't know, Captain America's friend dies in front of his face, and he gets sad and then he gets angry. And he runs after the person in his bare feet, and he tries to find him, and he jumps into the water, and he gets him out, and he punches him in the face. And that's appropriate masculinity, right? But inappropriate masculinity is just sitting there and being sad and being like, wow, that really sucked. Now I'm really sad. I'm going to stay with my sadness for a while. He rejects that sadness.
Yeah, and that's in a movie where it's okay. Like he rejects his sadness and goes on, and you never have to hear about the sadness again.
Right.
As though it magically disappeared. But in reality, that sadness didn't go anywhere. It's living in his house with him, and his family has to deal with it when it comes out as rage. Otherwise, because it's gonna go somewhere, and that's where like distortions come from. Is when you don't channel your real emotion. Anyway.
And that's emotional intelligence, what you're talking about. People should be paying people who have that high skill a lot of money to help them figure this shit out, you know?
Like that's why therapy is like this competitive edge in in the society. It's like, it's classist, right? It's like if you can afford to pay for it, because healthcare is classist in this country. But then also it's like we treat it as a separate thing that's like, it's kind of like money. Like the myths around therapy are, you don't talk about it, it's private, and it's only for people who can afford it. Those are like the cultural myths around it. But actually, it's like, who says that there's a strict boundary between your personal self and your social self? There isn't. There very clearly isn't. And our responsibility to each other at work, and even on the street, and even on the internet, is what we make it. And if you can manage a healthy sense of personal integrity, that is your social responsibility. That plays out in how good you are at your job, how motivated you are to do your job, how motivated you are to be in the right job, you know, and say no to the wrong job, and like, and keep things in balance, right? I'm not talking about perfection or an ideal utopia. I'm talking about flow and sustenance, and that like there's so many injustices that don't have to be. We all feel that, or at least this audience does. Like there's so many of us who feel that, who are like vibrating and responding from this energy of like, enough, this doesn't have to be this way. And we don't know what to do with that energy. And I'm like swimming in it as a practitioner, like coaching transformational leaders and looking for more to work with and looking to bring them together and create synergies and see the resources jump off of each other. That like, it's worth it to touch the stuff that you've been telling yourself doesn't belong at work. It does. You're competent to make those decisions for yourself. You're much more competent than you're giving yourself credit for, because it is the phantom white patriarch's job to tell you that you are incompetent and you need his permission to do everything. That's not real. That's not right.
That's right. Yep.
And it bears repeating, because the passive like obfuscation of power is that we all go along and slowly take in these assumptions, but we are capable of so much more. That's what our highly connected technological lives show us, is that we are capable of a lot. So let's go. Like,
let's go.
This is my anger is coming up like in this clarity of like, let's go. Let's have this conversation that you're afraid to have. Like, I'm not afraid, and I'm here to stand in that light with you. And actually, it's joyous and fun. It's where I find my joy. So get some.
Yes. Yes, that's so true. You know, we're coming back around. We're coming back around to what is it acceptable to show at work? We're coming back around to basically professionalism is socialized white supremacy. We're coming back around to, you know, you said we hide ourselves at work.
One set of rules. It's like all one set of rules, and we keep telling ourselves we can find a way to fit in it. Mm-hmm. And actually, we co-own all these rules. Mm-hmm. They're not just one person's. You know, if you're following them, and you're an adult, you're also an owner and a contributor and a purveyor of those rules. So mm-hmm. take some agency over it. There is power and freedom and liberation in your own, like taking responsibility for the life you're leading. Mm-hmm. Don't get me started, man.
No, I want to get you started. So, I mean, this is what you said. We were talking beforehand. You were like, we hide ourselves at work because we're not conditioned to trust the environment. You said we're conditioned to expect exploitation for what we hope is a living wage and retaliation for anything short of fitting in. And you said, we'll save our real feelings for our fake Twitter accounts. Thank you. And I felt that. Like, so I worked at a humane society for 3 months before they fired me. I've been fired a lot of times. I'm just going to say that right now. And I was like, I had to learn that didn't mean anything about me. I was like, that doesn't mean anything. You're not meant to fit in the system.
Absolutely. Because you're still here. Look what you're doing, Master.
And we're choosing ourselves, right? We're always making the table for each other.
Yes, there's no final judgment that defines us. We define ourselves.
And a permanent record doesn't exist. So this is the thing, right? What happened there was I went to work and felt really stifled by my boss. And I just sat there and did my work and just tried to show her how I felt. And like, I was just entering donations into the computer over and over again. And she's like, I feel like I don't know you. And I'm like, you don't deserve to know me. Anyway.
Why should you know me?
Why should she? I'm here to get, she basically, you know, and I felt coerced into taking a $15 an hour job when I've been making 20 on the East Coast. And this is back in the day, right? But at the same time, I was like, she manipulated me into taking this and I just resented her the entire time. And so I felt exploited and it wasn't really living wage. And then she's like, well, if you come in 2 minutes late on, you know, the next time you do that, I'm just going to fire you. And then she did. And I was like, wow, fuck this.
Thank you. She was on a power trip. It was a power trip dynamic.
Yeah.
And you probably very like accurately read the circumstance. You just did not fit it. And that's not a failing. That's actually like right relationship to that job is to not be in that job. Your right relationship is to be someplace else.
Exactly. If someone feels entitled to me, like, you know, as a boss and to like have all my innermost thoughts laid out for her, I'm like, you've got bad boundaries, you know, like.
Yeah, that sounds like bad boundaries. It sounds like a power trip. It sounds like not collaborating. Sounds, you know, it sounds like a dom sub work environment. And there are people looking for that who it would work well for. Who knows what the work is? Who knows how that work impacts other people or other systems? So I won't like venture to guess. I won't like say that I know. My sense is that that dynamic doesn't work well with others, but maybe hasn't works well for its own in-group circumstances. And like these are things like this is me just naming the dimension, the elements to it, so that you can be clear when you're assessing it, and be clear when you're permitting yourself to make a decision about it. You can permit yourself to make a decision that this is not right for me, I'm going to go someplace else, or this is not right for me, I'm going to engage and try to intervene, or this is right for me, I'm going to engage and try and join up. Those are 3 different decisions you can make while still accepting the reality of the situation and not pretending that it's something that it's not.
And that's where the sickness comes in, when like you just try to suppress your knowing, and you suppress, oh, I just have to go along to get along. You know what I mean? And like there's no other system outside of this.
I only have one option. There's not 10 different options around this one real circumstance. I only have one option. That's something we don't say, but is the direction on which we're acting.
That's right. So, you know, we talked a little bit about the problem of this expecting of this kind of behavior of fitting in. Can you say more about that? Like, what's wrong when people just say, you've got to fit in here and do as we do?
Well, again, as is my way, I'm always like, let's look at it from a sideways view. Let's shake the frame, right? So it's not that it's wrong fitting in or not fitting in. Like fitting in is a natural instinct of humans. We are highly social beings. We are the most social, you know, relative to ants. Like ants maybe are more social than us because they're the best collaborators in the world, but we are highly social. Like that's what we're dealing with now, is being so social that we can't manage it. Like, so anyway, not to go too far into that, like the desire to fit in is a basic human need. It's part of how we have evolved to survive, is to align ourselves with the people who can protect us, the people we can share resources with, the people who make us feel safe and that we belong. That's why belonging matters so much, is because it keeps us alive. It keeps us surviving. It's what creates legacy. It's what allows you to like have generations, is that you belong, right? So it's a basics to our survival. It's not, I'm not trying to wish that away. In people, I'm trying to bring that into our consciousness, that this desire to belong is there. That's part of what you're contending with when you're so hurt or so afraid or so sad about not fitting in. It's part of basic survival. And part of what toxifies it is not understanding it, is working with it passively and coming into work with all of your like home life, childhood trauma, right? Unprocessed, unaware, that you're coming into work with this belief system around belonging means that I have to abide by some sort of like bully code in order to prove my loyalty to you, right? Like that's where some people are coming from when they come to work. And the people that they're working for either can get with that or they can't. And the people they're working with either can get with that or they can't. So this person who shows up, right, like steeped in bully code, is in your office place and you're having a conflict with them. And you know instinctively whether or not you're going to get supported or they're going to get supported. And so you make decisions about like whether or not it's okay to speak up or not. And that's what's going on. What's harmful about that is not knowing it. Is the harm. What's harmful about that is the actual real direct harm. The way that sexual assault goes under the radar, the way that people are actually physically unsafe in any environment, even these whitewashed white collar environments. People find themselves physically unsafe because they can't speak up, because no one is giving acknowledgement or has put proper boundaries and constructs around the fact that fitting in matters and has rules, and that those rules are there and operating whether we say them out loud or not. So in order to protect the most vulnerable, we have to figure out how to give this language, how to say this out loud. That's what we owe if we're going to invite you into this space and say that we own it and you don't. If you're going to do that in a construct where you're the owner and you're inviting people in for a wage, you owe them a certain level of protection, and you are accountable to speak clearly to it in a way that everybody can understand. And really, like, what I believe is that we all own our own time. Whether or not you're paying me, I own my own body, my own time, my own life on this earth. So you can't own that even if you're paying me for my time. So on what terms are we in an ongoing negotiation? On what terms are we in an ongoing discussion of the context that we're in and whether or not it's working towards our agreed objectives? Everybody needs, every adult needs a space in which their dignity is preserved. That's also a basic human need. And so when we're talking about what's harmful about fitting in, what's harmful is real harm. Like, how are we guarding against or acknowledging the potential for true physical, emotional, spiritual harm that people are experiencing, so that people don't have to hide that harm and can actually be served through it, be cared for through it. Not just like healthcare is not just about your physical body. There's a lot of care involved in sustaining a life.
Woo! Oh, yes. 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 This is so rich. I am so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for you for sharing this. And I'm learning so much from you right now. The gems just keep coming and coming and coming and coming.
That's what I do. It's me standing in my truth. So thank you, Mazarine. Like, it's lonely sometimes to lead a self-directed life in a world where you're walking around and people are angry and their anger is a threat to you. Anti-Black anger is a threat to me when I try to stand up on my own 2 feet in this Black skin. And if you are blind to your anti-Black anger and the threat that it poses to me, then I have to react to that. And finding the safe spaces in which to just be like, stand in my own fearlessness and pursue what I know to be true, regardless, is daunting. And I have a lot of resources behind me that allow me to stand in this space that I'm grateful for, that I acknowledge. And so I'm acknowledging this space that you just gave me today as well. And I'm really grateful for it.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. It feels like we're coming to a close and I still have so many things I want to share and talk about. So maybe we're just going to have to save it for another time. Oh my God. Thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability and your strength today. And thank you for allowing me to come in with my vulnerability and my strength as well. And just having this conversation has been, I think, like a masterclass in understanding more about the structures of power and how we start to subvert them. And as you said, look to the side, look sideways at so that we can see the agency that we and others hold. And I am so excited for your presentation at the party at the end of the picture.
Yes, me too. I'm very, very excited. I can't wait. Let's get the party going.
Let's get to the party. Yeah, so 1 month from now, we're doing it. And we're gonna have.
And another thing I haven't shared with you, Mazarine, is that I'm a dancer. Like that, my first love, basically my first language besides English is dance. Like it's in my body, and like I'm ready for a dance party at any given moment.
I love that. Well, we started in the last party with dance every day, different dance teachers every day. This time, I think, because people are a little bit, I'm just going to speak for all humans on this planet, exhausted. We're going to start with a sound bath and yoga in the morning, and then we're going to do a dance party in the afternoon.
Yeah.
People waking up. So that's what we're going to do differently this time. But if you have any dance
people
to talk to and get out of this party, let me know. Because I want dance teachers to come in and give us little dance class.
Yes, I will spread the word.
Yeah.
I love it.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you again. And I really, really appreciate it. And if anybody wants to hear about this podcast to their friends, please do so. This was a blast.
Yes. And you can check me out if you want to talk more ever at CorinneMills.com.
Yes. And we'll have that in the show notes as well. Thank you again.